So let's get into buy or sell as we bring in producer Tyler Remchuk back in. Ty, how you doing?
I am good. Frank, you were in the last leg of your marathon day. So one more deep breath. It's almost over. Buy or sell, as always, is brought to you by Jock Market, the hybrid between fantasy sports and the stock market. If you want to play, go jockmkt.com. Use the promo code DFO20, gets you a $20 deposit bonus. You guys started the pod by talking about Mantha for Vrana, and that's exactly where I'm going to go with the first buy or sell question. I think Jacob Vrana will see his stock boost the most out of all the players dealt on deadline day. Frank, do you buy? Do you sell? If you sell, tell me whose stock you think will shoot up the most out of all the players traded today.
I'm going to sell just because he's going to Detroit. I mean, it's a tough place to play. It's a tough place to see your stock rise, and it's not going to be a place anytime soon where that stock is going to be rising. I would say of all the players traded on Monday, I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't none really jump out to me as someone whose stock is really going to be on the rise on Monday.
So all you know is that I'm wrong for saying Vrana. That's the whole take.
That's it. I'm selling all day long on Vrana's stock rising in any sort of the short-term future.
It's funny. I actually think Mantha is going to be the biggest benefactor because just look at his two centers he's going to play with in Washington. You either got Kuznetsov or Backstrom. Pick the line. I don't know when he's going to rotate around. If he gets some gravy time every now and then in that power play, I think Mantha goes into a winning tradition. I think he's going to become the player that people felt he could be and become a little bit more consistent. So I'm going to say Anthony Mantha. So I'm selling too.
Fair enough. Number 2, this one comes from Dan on Twitter. He is big on the Bruins adding Taylor Hall. He says that move makes them a dark horse Stanley Cup contender. Jason, are you buying or selling?
Oh, as a dark horse? Yeah, I would buy that for sure. I look at the Islanders, the Capitals, the Bruins, like Boston, they're still where they're at, despite just being ravaged by injuries on the back end. And, Taylor Hall comes in right now and, you see people around the league, Taylor Hall's done. Like, when you're a Hart Trophy winner, it's kind of hard to say your stock's going to rise again because it's kind of hard to get higher than that. But I think there's a guy that comes in with no pressure in Boston and gives them an opportunity. He's historically been a player and in lots of places where he didn't play with great players, who still was a driver in possession all the time. He struggled this year. I counted 7 breakaways he's missed. 7. That's not going to happen again. So I think the Bruins for sure could be a dark horse.
I'm going to sell. Something's been off on that Bruins team. They've been all over the place, and I know they've had injuries. Their defense is banged up. Their goaltenders are banged up. They've got that core that just, I don't know. I'm thinking of the mountain of teams they have to go through in the East. Like, I don't know that they're a dark horse contender to win their division, let alone the Stanley Cup. So I'm going to sell.
Number 3, you touched on this one a little bit as well, but I'm saying Florida made the overpay of the day in their deal getting Sam Bennett. Frank, are you buying or selling? Was that the biggest overpay we saw?
Yeah, I'm going to buy that. I think so. Like I said, bottom 6 forward. I get that he's a proven playoff performer and you like that sort of texture that you're adding to your team. But I think with all the smart moves that Bill Zito did in terms of preserving some of the currency that he had to give some of that away, I don't know that Sam Bennett is a guy that's putting your team over the top, and I'd be happy to eat my words if the Florida Panthers win the Stanley Cup.
Well, I don't think they're winning the cup, but the benefit they have is he's an RFA, so they could still be able to control his rights, even if they have to qualify him at the 2.9. I think the overpay was Foligno, a first, a third, and a fourth for, and hey, I get that he's got all the intangibles in the world. I don't question that at all, but that's a lot to give up for
it's a first and 2 fourths, right?
Yeah, I think it was a first and 2 fourths.
First and 2 fourths. There's no third in there.
Oh, I thought it was a third and a fourth. Either way, first and 2, third and fourth, whatever. 2 fourths and it's 3 picks for a guy who, I just think that's a real big ask for somebody who might walk after this year's postseason.
It's almost
and
like
is likely to walk, by the way, because there was already talk that he could go back to Columbus. I don't know if there's any sort of idea or conversation that's been planted. And also, I just don't really, unless he's taking a bargain deal, I don't know how the Leafs afford him.
Yeah.
It's almost like you guys read my mind. That's where I was going next on buy or sell. Even though the price was high, even though some Leafs fans may have wanted Taylor Hall, I believe Nick Foligno was the perfect fit for this Toronto Maple Leafs roster. Jason, are you buying or selling on Foligno? Maybe not being the best player, but the perfect fit.
Well, he's a good fit. I'll say that. And I know that some people, well, you just said he's overpaid. Well, you can be overpaid and a good fit at the same time. I
Can
think
you?
Nick Foligno, why can't you? He's a good fit. I just wouldn't have wanted to pay. Like, it's a good fit. It's like, hey, you know what? I really like to have a nice tiger suit. I'm not going to go pay $2,000 for it when I know I can get it for $1,000.
I mean, I guess, but like, this is a team that it's going to take forever to see those picks in your lineup if you ever do. And they're right there knocking on the door with, a fantastic opportunity and maybe the easiest year ever to get to the semifinals, knowing the teams that you have to beat ahead of time. I don't know. I think at a certain point, whether it was a second and a fourth or a first and 2 fourths, how much of an overpay is it? If that is your best determined fit, I think that's what you do.
Yeah, well, to me, you go in knowing what you want to spend as capital. And I think Dubas was, and he said this for months. We all knew he was willing to part with his first round pick. So I think he had it in his head that that's not an overpayment, and that's his choice. And I respect him for doing it, but I think Nick Foligno can be a good fit on your team. I wouldn't have wanted to pay that high of a price for him. But hey, I guess if that was the going rate, then great. But to me, I think it's a good fit for their player. I just think they overpaid to get him.
Frank, you buying or selling?
Yeah, I'm buying. I think, for all the reasons mentioned, and I think the funny thing about the fit for Nick Foligno is that in an odd way, they kind of backed their way into it. I get that some Leaf fans might have wanted Taylor Hall for the price that was paid. They never had any interest in Taylor Hall, to my knowledge. He was the kind of the opposite of a good stylistic fit. And I think some of the other guys that they looked at, I think they were interested in Palmieri, may not have been as good of a fit as Foligno is. And I think with Granlund, same thing, may not have been as good of a fit as Foligno. So, Granlund stays in Nashville, they have to move on. Then Palmieri goes to the Islanders and they have to move on. And they end up with Foligno as this guy that's sort of, maybe they should have started with from the beginning.
Last one here. We're going to stick up in the North Division. I think the Jets may have made a mistake by not going a little bit more all in and maybe sacrificing some more significant future assets. Frank, you buy or sell that the Jets made a mistake not loading up at the deadline?
I'm going to sell just because when you look at the guys that were left and you look at the guys that did get traded, I don't know that any one of those guys, you're willing to pay a huge price to get. Are they really big difference makers and impact players? I really don't think so. It'd be different if we were talking about an Ekholm, but like I said, we took him off the board. He wasn't available for the most part in Nashville. And if they entertain conversations on Monday, then that's a different story. But for the guys that were in and around the trade bait world, you mentioned the price that Tampa paid for David Savard, and that's a lot. I don't think that Winnipeg was in love with him at that price. And I think, ultimately it's tough when there's pressure on you in your market to make a move of significance, but sometimes prudence is the better part of valor.
Yeah, I agree with the fact that of the current guys who got traded for left defense, you know what, to go in and get any of them, like Kulikov wasn't going to necessarily fit there. They
been there, done that.
They had Forbert, right? But I would have tried to take a bigger swing because I think Alexiak would have been a better addition than Jamie Benn, right? And I don't think Jamie Alexiak
100%. But Jamie Alexiak would have cost you a first round pick.
Wow. What?
That's what I think, because the Stars, they weren't willing to move him. It was like, present me with a real big boy offer, or we're not even having a conversation.
Well, then, hey, obviously I'm not going to pay a first round pick for Jamie Alexiak, but, and if that, hey, unless they really want to re-sign him, which is great. But if somehow Jamie Alexiak walks, because Dallas, I don't believe is making the playoffs, their games in hand have dwindled down from Nashville. They're still that many points back now. So if you lose Jamie Alexiak because you were asking too much, he's not a player that I would live or die. Like, I think he's gonna be a good addition to your team and can really help. But at the same time, if I don't think I'm going to re-sign him and he walks out of Dallas, to me, that's a mistake. So I don't know. I would have given up a 2nd round pick for Jamie Alexiak and not really thought twice about it, because I think for the Jets, a team that they haven't had playoff success, Frank, in a long time, like even just winning a round.
They went to the Western Conference Final in 2018.
Yeah, but that's four years ago now.
3 years ago. I mean, like,
4 playoffs.
This is a cyclical sport. I mean, like, I get it, but at the same time, we've been knocking on the Jets all year for their defense, and they've managed just fine to this point. Like, they're right there in the thick of the North.
Yeah, but we both know playoff style hockey is very different, right? Like in Toronto, because if you say that the path is that easy out of the North,
I'm not saying it's that easy. It's so clearly defined. It's unlike any other year. Other years you're dealing with wild card teams. You don't know what the matchups look like. You know that if at this point, you know what the landscape looks like. There's only 3 teams that you can play, and you're only going to play 2 of them.
Oh no, I agree. So then isn't that the year to do it then?
It is the year to do it, but I'm saying based on what ended up being actually available, and unless you were really willing to pay a ridiculous price, Jamie Alexiak wasn't available. I think a lot of teams would have given up a 2nd round pick for Jamie Alexiak, but they wanted a 1st, I think, and they plan on re-signing him. And I think it's one of those things that's going to wait until after the expansion draft, because there's no sense in signing him before then. That I think it's hard to swallow, but I think they ended up making the right move given what was available.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I think the Jets, I felt of all the teams that were close, that I didn't expect them to make a massive move, but I like the Jets team. And I felt like they did a little disservice to their team by only adding Jordy Ben.
Winnipeg and Carolina, I think, are those 2 teams you kind of feel like underwhelmed 100%. About, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? To be fair, I kind of feel that way about Colorado too.
I was just going to say Colorado, like
Dubnyk, Soderberg, really and Nemeth. They're a fantastic team. But again, why aren't you trying to put your team over the top? And maybe it again comes back to the same thing of what I was saying, is you can only deal with what's out there. But I don't know. Those are like 3 really underwhelming guys. I can't believe Devin Dubnyk is the guy with a sub 900 save percentage the last number of years is your guy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Frank. And I have to think, and I talked to some people in Colorado, that they get the suspicion that maybe Johnson's returning. Because if he does, then I can get why you didn't go out for a better defenseman. But if not, I'm like, man, that could be a lost opportunity, because I agree. I think Colorado is loaded, and another defenseman would have been huge for them, better than Patrick Nemeth.
Especially when you see Tampa do what they did with Savard. You're like, well, if that's the team we're squaring off against in the Cup final, it's hard to argue a way in which they're not deeper.
Yeah, totally.
There you go. There's another spirited edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by Jock Market. Use that promo code DFO20, gets you a $20 deposit bonus at jockmkt.com, and you can buy up all that sweet, sweet Jacob Verana stock.